Yeah.
I think the first grade, or the going into first and second grade class had 38 kids in it.
We're ready, Janet. Sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine. Okay, we will call the meeting to order. This is the regular monthly meeting for the Truancy School District for the month of June. Christy, would you do roll call?
Teresa Gander.
Yes.
Scott Walter.
Here.
Earl Wallace.
Here.
Rich James.
Here.
Trish Clements.
Here.
Janet Mathis.
Here. Affirmation of proof of publication of the agenda.
I, Doug Olson, hereby certify the notice of the Wednesday, June 9th, regular school board meeting was published in the Advocate News on June 3rd and on June 9th, 2021, and posted on the appropriate billboards June 4th and June 7th.
Okay, thank you. The agenda, do we have any deletions, I guess?
Nope. We're set.
We have a motion to approve the agenda as we have it.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
That motion was by Earl and seconded by Tricia to approve the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Audience to visitors and board members. We did not have any requests from the public to speak during this portion of the meeting. We do have one of our staff members here, Rebecca, will be talking about the mindfulness program, I believe for the summer, but you're up.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me here tonight. I'll just give you a little bit of background information, how we have gotten to the point of thinking we need a mindfulness program for the school. So I've been teaching for 21 years, all in this building, and I've witnessed, a lot of students come through the doors, and as the years have gone on, there have been changes in those students. And I think a lot of those changes have been brought on by multiple factors. I mean, the pandemic was a huge one, obviously, but social media, trauma, our busy lifestyle, stress, the list could go on. The kids that I see every day are now dealing with some really big emotions that we didn't used to see. They're also unable to handle those emotions or control their emotions. Not always, but we see it much more often with them. And they also usually can't even identify what they're feeling or why they're feeling. So what that looks like in the classroom or on the playground is misbehavior, defiance, violence, lots of tears and meltdowns, a lot of disrespect, kids that just shut down, they can't do anything for you, and a lot of impulse control issues. So that all equates to a lot of lost instruction time in your day if you're dealing with that stuff. And for kids being under that much stress, it also means that, things aren't going well for them. They tend to have, there's research on all of this, they tend to have lower executive functioning skills, which are your organization, your planning, your goal setting. They have a lower working memory, their emotional regulation and resilience is not where it should be, and those things are all imperative for them to be able to learn. It also creates an increase in mental health issues like anxiety and depression when they're dealing with that much stress all the time. So as my classroom looked like this more and more often and for more parts of my day, I started searching ways for, to do something different. What can I do in my room that will alleviate some of this for the kids? And everything I would research, it kept coming back to the mindfulness. And I know when you say mindfulness, like Scott alluded to earlier, it elicits an image of somebody sitting in a room perfectly still meditating. And that's not what we're talking about. The modern day term for mindfulness is so much more than that. It's teaching people, young and old, because this is a movement among a lot of adults, but it's also becoming a movement amongst kids. It's skills to cope with stress, adversity, disappointment, trauma. It's understanding your emotions and learning how to pause before you react to those emotions. It's developing a mindset of growth and gratitude. These are all lifelong skills that are really necessary, right now for these kids, but also as they go forward into their future. You don't have time for me to give you all the research that's out there, showing you the benefits, but I can tell you that there is continual research being done as people see how well this is working for kids. And I did give you guys a list of some of the benefits that have been described, by schools that have implemented this. There are some states that are going statewide with an, mindfulness program in their school, but there are a lot of schools that have implemented it, and the reduction in behaviors that they have seen the improvement in kids' attitudes, I tried to make the list as clear as I could, and there's just a lot of benefits for everybody if this is, what you can do. I've gotten pretty excited about the prospect of what this could look like here at Kickapoo, and so I've been chirping in Kim's ear for probably a couple years now, I would guess. And I think the pandemic just intensified the need. It just became apparent that our kids were really, really overwhelmed. And Kim and Katie agreed, and they had me sign up for 2 classes through Mindful Schools is the program I'm doing. The first class was really about developing my own mindfulness practice, because their theory is, you can't teach it if you don't understand it and you don't practice it yourself. So that one was pretty short, and I really enjoyed it. It actually helped me because I've been using some of the techniques, for a couple of years now, and I really enjoyed that. The second class, when I'm about 3 weeks into that one, it's 8 weeks long, is about teaching it to the classroom. They do have a third class that is implementing it school-wide also. That is something we could look at in the future if that is the direction we decide to go. But and one thing I really appreciate about it is very research-based, and you can look it up, Mindful Schools, look it up, but it's very research-based, and it also is very trauma-sensitive. They understand that some of these things that doesn't do anything for us or doesn't affect us might affect a child in a different way if they've had past traumas. So it's very sensitive to all of that, which is also important, I think, for the population we work with. So as we've been going forward with this, Kim and I have researched a lot of the best practices for implementing a program like this into a school. And the keys to making it successful really start with the top down. That's why I'm here. We have to be on board as a school board, as a staff to say, yes, this is something that's really important. Schools that don't have that backing, it doesn't turn out to be nearly as successful. But then the second part is that, but don't implement it from the top down. And Kim can talk about this a little bit too. We tried, we have this Mind Up curriculum, which is similar to that. And we tried giving that to everybody. Well, everybody's got enough to do. And then the pandemic hit, and it hasn't been, really easy to implement, I guess, at this point. But that was their point, was you wouldn't have Doug teach swimming lessons if he didn't know how to swim. So you wouldn't have a mindfulness teacher.
Well, we wouldn't have him teach swimming lessons.
No, probably not.
Excellent floater.
But you wouldn't have a mindfulness teacher teach mindfulness if they didn't understand it, they didn't practice it themselves. So that is the third part, is making sure you have a trained staff that understands what they're doing and is really invested in the program and practicing themselves. They also have found that they like to call it the drip feed is much more successful than like an intense, like if you shoved it all at them at the beginning of the school year in September and then just kind of forgot about it, they're not going to get anything. But like a slow, 2 or 3 times a week for just small pieces is much more effective for kids. It allows them to build their practice and understand, repeating those behaviors over and over. And along with that, make sure it's structured, that you're teaching them the skills, but it's, also has a lot of variety and gives them different things. And then the other part that is important is teaching the children about their brain and how it works and why these tools are helpful to them. So what I've gathered from these 2 classes and from the research I've done, I'm going to be able to use in summer school next week. And I am excited about it, Janet, just so you know. But we're going to use many different strategies to introduce the mindfulness. There are some breathing strategies that you teach kids just to calm your body down. And I've done it in my kindergarten classroom for the last couple of years, and it works. Like, I will see kids, because I teach them it's called the 5-finger, and they go up, you breathe in, you breathe out, you breathe in. I'll see kids do that. Like, when you can tell they're upset, they'll just start doing it themselves. And so we'll do some of those breathing activities. We will do some guided meditation type things, but it's much more, it's not them sitting in a perfect posture. It's about letting them find what's comfortable for them. And journaling, yoga, mindful eating, walking, and we are going to talk about the brain and how it works, those different things. We're going to read books and we're going to learn about emotions. Mindfulness can be many different things, and I'm grateful that I'm getting the chance to try this with the kids. I feel like the skills that we're going to develop are vital for the future success of them. And, I would love to see this become part of our curriculum as a school. I don't know if that's an option. I don't know where this will head, but that's all I have. If you have any questions or.
How does that play out in the classroom, Eric? Do you allot special time during the day just for mindfulness activities, or as the class starts to get out of hand, do you pause and?
Yep, and, you know, it's, like I said, it's a building strategy, obviously. You start with very small things at the beginning, but, I mean, you could probably say to just about any one of my kindergartners, do a rainbow breath, and they'll know exactly what they're supposed to do because we've done it enough times, or, you know, and sometimes it's not deep breathing and calming down. Sometimes it's letting them get their wiggles out. You know what I mean? It's recognizing what they need too, and their mindfulness might be different than ours, but it's teaching them to recognize my body needs something different and I can't hurt him because I can't figure it out. I need to, you know, figure out a way to take care of that.
Is there any chance you could share some of that research with me or with the board? If there's like a summary article of the research?
I tried to find a couple, but yeah, I can share a couple of them.
I'd like to read more about it.
Other questions? Well, thank you very much for
Yeah.
taking the time to be here.
Well, thank you, and I'll come back and report how summer school goes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye.
Hello.
Thanks, Erica.
All right, anything else under audience to visitors and board members? And we will move on to expense vouchers and receipts. Roll.
It wasn't a lot, just, Chippewa Valley Sporting Goods, a lot of different, football tackle stuff and that, some soft, baseball pants and shirts and stuff that needed, just lots of odds and ends and some down markers and that for football, and just all adds up nowadays, so that's on that. And then, Jeff had, Fastenal, it was, so what I would get from there was a case of gloves for use at the, so that's, I think, everything we had.
Thank you. Other questions at all? If not, do we have a motion to approve the expense vouchers and receipts?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Motion was by Tricia and seconded by Scott to approve the expense vouchers and receipts. Roll call.
Earl Wallace.
Yes.
Rich James.
Yes.
Tricia Clements.
Yes.
Teresa Gander.
Yes.
Scott Walter.
Yes.
Janet Mathis.
Yes. Motion passes. Consent agenda, we have minutes from our regular May meeting from the 12th. Our Buildings and Grounds Committee met on 28th of May. And Policy Committee had their monthly, at least, meeting on June 2nd. Anybody have any questions, comments, corrections? I have one thing in the action for item D is the CISA contract. This is a bit picky, but, well, one of them is, I think it was MadLearn instead of MedLearn.
Yep, man.
Okay. So that's really picky, but, when I read this, it sounds like MadLearn is part of the CISA contract, because that's where you come up with that total of 28.7. And maybe it is, but I didn't understand that was through CISA.
It is,
It is,
CC.
okay.
Yep, he got a
So-
group rate if enough districts came on, otherwise it was.
I just didn't remember.
Yep, otherwise it was
It
gonna
sounded
be
like a great program.
5,000, so they got a
I
group.
can change that to Mad.
Yeah, just change that one letter. That was a really picky correction. Anyway, that was my
It makes me happy that you read it.
That was my question. Anything else? All right. Can we get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Also move.
I'll second that.
That motion was by Scott and seconded by Tricia to approve the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right, action agenda. We started with letter A, an item we talked about last month. COVID pay for employees. We got a 4 attachments here. Doug, did you want to say anything more about this?
No, just last month, I think a couple of comments were made that option number 2 resonated a little bit stronger with people with maybe a change in the nurses amount from page 1, if I remember the context of the conversation.
That's my recollection also.
Mhm.
Anybody have any other thoughts before we act on this? If not, would someone care to make a motion then?
I'll make a motion to
Oh, go ahead. You got it, Rich.
recommend option 2.
And then that would be with the,
750 for Trish.
with the 750, yeah, I can remember that.
I'll second that.
All right, so we have a motion by Rich and seconded by Tricia to go with option 2. The way it's presented, with one change of, for our school nurse, the amount being $750. Okay, we don't have anybody online, so we can probably do this, by voice vote. But at any point, just so everybody knows, at any point during the meeting, if I go to start a voice vote and you would like to have a roll call, just say so. It goes to roll call. So the motion was to go with option 2. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Item B is the library plan.
Yeah, we just, Jen needs to have it officially noted as an action item. So she needs to upload that to DPI, that we have reviewed it and approved the library plan. A requirement of, I think she said once every 3 or 5 years or something, I can't remember exactly. 3, there it is, 21 through 24.
She was here, I don't know, last month, but the month before. April, and yeah, went through it at that point, so.
Yeah, and I didn't know it needed to be an action item until she said, hey, are you guys gonna put that in? So, we do,
We sure
we
can.
fixed it, yeah.
Yeah, I thought her presentation was fine. So I don't- Any questions, anybody else?
I can make a motion to approve the library plan. I'll second that.
The motion was by Tricia and seconded by Teresa to approve the library plan. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right, item C, we have a letter of resignation from our elementary interventionist, Emily Drone.
Yeah, Ms. Drone worked for us, I think, for the last 3 months of the school year and had her heart set on having her own elementary classroom, a traditional classroom instead of more of an interventionist position that served across grade levels. And she kept interviewing and she was hired by Boscoville. So she handed in her letter at, I believe it was the last day of school to Kim and I. So. We wished her well at the end of the year in service and thanked her for spending a couple months with us and working with the kids. But you know, if that's where her heart is, the job description didn't match, so yeah.
All right, do we have a motion to accept this resignation then?
I'll make a motion to accept her resignation.
I'll second that.
So the motion was by Earl and seconded by Tricia to approve the letter of resignation from Emily Drone. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right, item D, we have a letter of resignation from Jen Bielhaber as a board member. This came in shortly after the last meeting. I guess we usually put these on here and go ahead and act on them, even though
It's not a,
technically we really don't have.
basically, it could even just be an acknowledgement.
Yeah.
You know, rather
Leave it
than-
at that.
Okay.
Acknowledge that and thank her very much for her several years of service. we appreciate everything that she did and wish her well. So that lets us move on to item E, which is accident insurance for the coming year.
I'm gonna let Kent briefly speak to this. We talked about it last month. There was very few claims over the last couple of years. I think he's gathered the history from Melissa, who got it from the insurance company. So it's not a very well-utilized program. There's more and more districts eliminating student accident insurance, as I surveyed my CISA colleagues. And I was surprised that some had done it as many as 5 to 7 years ago had stopped purchasing it. So I think the real conversation began happening after the Affordable Care Act was passed. And then schools responded a few years after that. So.
Yeah, the history aligns with just what you're saying, Doug. And, in 16, 17, we had 7 claims. In 17, 18, we had 8. 18, 19, 2, 19, 20, 2, and 20, 21, 0. So claims have certainly gone down quite a little, as our premium has too. The last 2 years, it's held steady at $4,223, and the renewal this year's quoted at $3,978. So, $300 or $250 less. But I guess it's just really whether this is a service that anybody's getting anything out of at this point in time, or do we want to put that roughly $4,000 to use somewhere else?
And just for clarification, this is like if the kids in the playground, they fall, they get hurt, that could be the insurance if they don't have it.
If they, yeah.
Yep.
Or as a supplement potentially.
Yep.
So we don't charge people for that or anything? It's just if something happens, we
No,
let them
not
know
for that
it's
part.
there.
We do also offer, and this doesn't cost us any money, but families have the opportunity to purchase additional supplemental insurance for sports. But I don't think we have had anybody purchase that in a long, long time. So.
Well,
My thought is we drop it.
kind of my thoughts.
If we haven't had anybody purchase the extracurricular insurance, and we've had 4 claims in 3 years, it doesn't
Doesn't make
necessarily
any
seem
sense
like
to
it's
keep going.
right, the best expenditure of resources.
So Teresa, you want to make that into a motion?
Sure, I make a motion that we drop the property and liability insurance.
No.
Let's do next.
No, we keep
what am
that.
I on?
We need that one.
I jumped straight too far. Sorry, I scrolled. I didn't do it.
I know.
Let's do
I
my
get
accident
it.
insurance. So sorry.
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion by Teresa and a second by Scott to drop off the student accident insurance. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes also. Item F is a request for a fishing club. We have an attachment, Jake wrote a page here. Oh, we used to kind of have something like this when there was repeated this year's.
That's what I was
It
saying.
was a summer school fishing.
And then it was summer school, yeah,
Yeah.
Oh,
which seems like a good time to do.
yeah.
I think, Jake's kind of envisioning starting it, but then hoping that it turns into more of, as he indicated in his letter, more of the ice fishing, because that's when the state has their sanctioned
Yeah, the sanctioned.
contest or.
So do we picture this kind of like the track thing is now, would I be correct in making that assumption that it will kind of work like the track? We approve it and say it's okay to have this activity. It's a little different because that's kind of run with the sportsman's club and.
Right, it's a separate organization.
As opposed to saying it's a club. I mean, I guess
And this
that's
is a
where I'm
staff
sitting is why.
Could be like a forensics, just a regular club within school.
Well, is he actually asking this to be recognized as a club and put on the extracurricular salary schedule? And that, are we gonna officially make a club, and then, and then how do we not provide transportation? Because, I mean, I appreciate what he wants to do here and the kids he wants to reach who maybe don't have other activities. But then if you're saying we're gonna meet at other fishing spots, and you have to get yourself there, is that really are those the kids that are gonna be able to do it?
Yeah, it's a good question, but that's essentially how TRAP operates.
Right, but TRAP isn't a club. TRAP is an organization that we basically approved that they could say they're the Kickapoo Trap Club, so they can be in the, whatever they're
Wisconsin High
sanctioning,
School,
Yeah.
Trap
Yeah.
Association.
whatever their sanctioning
So
body is.
designation as a club obligates us to.
I don't know, I'm more asking. is that
I would
how
think
it's
I would
thought
think
or not?
it would, I know Jake's not asking that in his letter,
Right.
but I think that
I'm trying to
if we
think.
sponsor it, it is a staff member, I think it does then be something that we have to put, if we're gonna sponsor it and look at it, we have to put it someplace on our extracurricular schedule. It's kind of like the robotics club, we put that on our extracurricular, that's about the closest thing I could tell you. A teacher does it, it's outside of school time, and, it's mostly weekends. And we put it on the extracurricular schedule after a year or two of saying, where does this go? Or we give her, how do we do this? And we finally found a spot for it. So I would say that, yes, we would probably need to do that. I think this summer, what he's indicating or envisioning is just making it open, and he's not worried about, he wants to just be able to pass on his passion and his knowledge of fishing to kids that want to be there with parent permission, and not have it be associated with the extracurricular schedule. But I would say that we would need to take that up in the next couple months to find a spot for it, because I view it more like the robotics club than anything else if we were going to offer it.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I like the idea of it. I think it's kind of a life skill for kids to be able to do it, to
And it
learn.
may reach kids that
Yeah.
don't through it.
Because I did like his.
TRAP does that.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And he talked about that, trying to reach a different group of kids. I don't know. If we can make it work, I think it's a great idea. But I did have some of those same questions, like how does this fall? What does it look like?
Well, there's
I
nothing
think it's
to
a
say
good
no,
idea.
but I wanted to look at kind of how it works.
Can it be? Because I think it is a good idea. Could somehow be agreed upon, like Doug kind of said, through the summer, it's kids get there if they can get there and see how it operates, and then, at the end of the summer, it come up again if we actually make it a club.
See what the interest
I think
was.
so.
To say it's approved do we have to do any action, or is this the kind of thing the administration just approves?
I think he wanted to just make sure that the board is aware and that they're supportive of it, because he would still be acting in a capacity as an adult, meeting kids at this spot for the purpose. He'd be sending out a letter to the students or an email to those students saying, hey, if you're interested, I would imagine that would be the way he'd be reaching out.
I like that idea, and then we can look at it
See how it goes.
at the end, like in August or something, and see how it's went, what his response has been.
It's essentially a pilot program.
There you go. So do you think we want a motion for that, or just
Yeah, you.
okay?
I'll make a motion that we approve the fishing club for this summer.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion to approve the fishing club for this summer. And the motion was by Tricia, seconded by Teresa. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. The travel club. Lots of things coming back tonight, aren't there? So Megan presented about this, we talked about this. We have to make a decision.
Well, we had kind of the question about, how we would approve it. If we were gonna approve it, kind of hanging out there, and we received an email from a community member just expressing that, I think if the board does go in that direction, it would also be appropriate to allow for another type of student to attend if they chose to make a motion that, because the students would be sleeping in the same rooms, that, that would be required to be vaccinated, that anybody who has had COVID already would also be allowed to attend because they would have some level of natural immunity. I think that was a part that we left out of our conversation, certainly very valid.
Yeah, and I don't know the science on that. They had a year ago, is that?
I believe in his email to us was providing evidence that they, through an assay test, that they have antibodies to COVID, showing that they had the infection.
Certainly be conclusive.
Right. And I don't know if that's the direction we want to go anyway. I just wanted to make sure that I kind of summarize the conversation.
I guess it would make sense.
I think it's legitimate. They can go to the doctor and get a test saying, yes, you have the antibodies. That's just what's in my brain. It's what they found in science, that science is saying.
Yep. I'd be okay with that. That's the only.
I think the only other thing is we only had talked about so many, and there's more that, like 29, and I'd be fine with, 29.
I told her that I would like her to take Traverse anyways, because if there is an injury, a twisted ankle, whatever, it's hard to get a bus where you're going, and that if they're gonna be in the UP, it would just make sense to have another vehicle, so.
So how many kids, she had 29 sign up, is that the?
I believe
She said it was
Yeah,
29
I
signed
think
up
she
and
just-
paid for when she documents together. Other questions or?
Well, I also just wanted to make a mention too, I know masks is what it is, but if they're all vaccinated on that bus, I don't think they should have to wear masks either. Trip, they're vaccinated.
Yeah, we're kind of between protocols and everything now. The other thing is
Yeah, well,
by
the CDC
the time
said
they
you can-
take the trip, we may actually have a protocol.
Make a good point. If you make that as a requirement, you're not required to quarantine if you've been exposed if you're vaccinated, so it would make sense. I think it was just in her planning, trying to be as inclusive as possible.
Oh, yeah,
Right,
yeah,
and we're
well,
seeing
so
that
things
from-
were different than they are now, and now the CDC saying you can be on a.
And we're seeing that
Transportation
from
if you're
several of
vaccinated.
these requests with staff members who are, to their credit, just trying to be extremely cautious and protect people. Well, we need a motion, and I guess we just need to clarify what we're saying on this. The, providing the test showing immunity, I guess, instead of having a vaccination would be acceptable. And Teresa, if I understood right, is wearing masks on a bus or indoors, won't necessarily
I think it's
be
an
required.
optional.
Optional, that's a good way to put it, let's decide. And then where they're out and about, and maybe to a certain way, and then the other chaperones can certainly use their judgment if for any reason they think that's necessary.
So I'll make a motion that we approve the travel club, that students have to be vaccinated or have antibodies in their system, and that everybody be allowed to go with masks be optional.
And then you have to have the 29 that, allowing all 29.
All 29.
Just so.
Assuming they're vaccinated.
Yeah.
All right, so we have the motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, so motion by Tricia, seconded by Teresa. Everybody clear on what we're allowing here? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Band club. band is now formed too.
Yeah, the band trip is more about where they're going and what educational value in terms of performances and things they're trying to try to do. And not long on protocol because we all have been here before. Next April or whatever the trip is scheduled for, April 11th, could look a lot different than today. So let's not try to predict it. Let's just say, are we okay with?
And I totally agree with that. The only thing I'm wondering is in his communication, Mr. Smith's communication with parents, would it be worthwhile to make sure he notes that students were required to follow whatever protocols the school has in place at that time? We don't know what they're gonna be, but if there are protocols, parents need to at least say, you know, you need to think about this. Looks good, you know, looks good now, but would it say something basically to the effect of whatever protocols are in effect in the school at that time, they will have to observe those. I mean, that's just my thought, that might be a good thing to mention.
How many people did he have signed up for?
He knows.
I don't know yet. I didn't get an update from him. I talked to him 3 times today, but that was not part of my question. Yep, no, I don't have it, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
And this is band and choir, so I should.
Greg might be watching and he could text me.
Seems like about mid-50s maybe.
Okay.
I think, if I remember right.
He must have been thinking less than 57 because it says worst case is 57 and that was around 2020 and he's hoping it's 950. Any other questions? Sounds like their typical band trip from years past, so it's nice to see that they're gonna be able to do it again fairly soon. Other questions or concerns at this point? We'll hear more details as it gets closer.
Yes.
We have a motion to approve the band trip.
I'll make a motion to approve the April 2022 band trip with students following whatever protocols are in effect with regard to COVID at that time.
Okay, we have a motion. A motion is by Rich and the second is by Earl to approve the proposed band trip for next April with students abiding by whatever protocols are in effect at that time. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item I, annual meeting date.
Yeah, Chris and I were just wondering if it would make sense to align it on that Wednesday instead of on the Monday.
So we're looking at the last
Wednesday.
Wednesday in October.
Yes, just to stay consistent, not to confuse people with days of the week that the meetings are on.
Looked ahead of the calendar this date. I think it makes sense. That's what we do, and we usually have at least a short meeting after that, so.
It's in keeping with our previous timelines, required to have it by the end of the month.
Yep.
We get our certified aid on the 15th, and we're able to account for those minor changes from the estimates that we've received. And
Okay. Makes sense to me. So that would be Wednesday, October 27th. Which is perfect, because it's the fourth Wednesday when we tend to have a special meeting.
And that's parent-teacher conferences too, which should be fine.
unless people want, well, we usually have 2 days of parent-teacher conferences, right, the Wednesday and Thursday, so we just keep board members
Oh, do you do it?
on the Thursday
You
plan.
do that in the evening though, on Wednesday.
I think, yeah.
What is it? Yeah, we're done by 7.
We're done by 7, I think.
Well,
Yeah,
guess what?
3:30 to
Starting-
7:30, I think.
So we can put a sign up, want to see your school board award? Come on.
Yeah.
We should serve refreshments.
Leftover cookies.
It'd probably be easier for those that have kids to tie them together, because you could be here and see teachers and then come.
Sounds good. We might actually have people. All right, we do need a motion for that, then if that's acceptable to everyone, then we will set the annual meeting date for Wednesday, October 27th.
I'll make that motion.
I'll say.
Okay, so we have a motion by Tricia and seconded by Earl to set the annual meeting date for October 27th. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right, now we get to property and liability insurance. So.
This one we don't get to drop.
Just trying to save
We get to
money.
drop one of the
A little
bids.
more expensive.
You get to drop one.
Okay.
So,
Go ahead, bud.
yeah, so, as a renewal was coming due, we, just because, you know, it, just to keep things honest, we sought another bid from, Tricor Insurance. We used to have Tricor,
Yeah.
a while back. And so we actually, just reached out to them. Actually, they reached out to us and said, hey, would you like a bid? And we thought, yeah, this is probably a good time to do this. And so they actually gave us a bid direct through Tricor, not using any one of their agents, just using them as the insurance company. So anyway, you can see that the bids are quite a little different. The insurance center who we're with right now, obviously there's a little bit of an increase. You know, that stuff tends to happen. Our workers' comp model went up slightly. We added a couple more newer autos or new buses. Total value with inflation, you know, those types of things happen. So not ridiculous amount though, and still definitely quite a little under what we got for a quote from Tricor. So you know, we compared limits, deductibles, all those things, and there was minor differences here and there, but nothing that was, you know, whoa, that's why, or any of that kind of thing. So our recommendation is to stick with the insurance center.
And that's the first page.
That's the first page, yes, the 21-22 premium.
One of the interesting things for me in the conversation we had with both agents, very consistent conversation, was I looked at as a percentage how much the cyber insurance went up, even though we're small. A $700 increase doesn't seem to be a lot of money, but as a percentage of what it was, it is a very high increase. And so I asked him, and he said, you know, larger districts are paying. He said, I just quoted one out in the neighborhood of $29,000 to $30,000 a year for the cyber insurance. And he said that some of the very large districts are not able to get it even if they want it. So it is an increasing area of risk, and insurance companies are responding by raising rates
And probably changing what they're going to cover.
yes, and then eliminating some of the highest risk institutions, which tend to be many users and a lot less control over what comes in onto your network and et cetera. A lot of different, probably points of control, different IT people for different buildings in the same district, and they're just not able to purchase the insurance. So it was informative. I'm always curious about stuff like that. And you read about some of it in the news too. So. But we've also been very pleased with the service from the insurance center.
Been great.
Have a reason to recommend going away from them. Their bid is also the most competitive. So.
Do we have any questions?
I'll make a motion to approve the property and liability insurance through the insurance center.
I'll second it.
We have a motion by Tricia and seconded by Rich to approve the property and liability insurance bid from the insurance center. Do we need to roll call on this?
Can if we want to.
Why don't?
Sure could, yeah, with the dollar amount, maybe so.
Okay, I know we used to do that, sharing it for some reason.
All right, I can do that. Rich James,
Yes.
Tricia Clements,
Yes.
Teresa Gander,
Yes.
Scott Walter,
Yes.
Earl Wallace,
Yes.
Janet Mathis.
Yes. All right, motion passes. And the next item, Baird forecasting model. On the switch.
Deletion of track first.
Oh, I skipped one.
Yep, you skipped
Oh,
K.
I crossed it off already. Donations is road project. Oh, forgot
don't want to skip those.
No, I don't want to skip those. I want to just skip them. So as the notes say, the Viola United Methodist Church donated $20,000 to the track shed project and another $1,000 from Donald and Nancy.
Pretty awesome.
Yeah, very awesome. Very nice that the church stepped up and did that, so.
So will donations cover the whole project?
We don't have a bid for the concrete, but we're gonna be awful close, I think. So,
That's
It is
the price
pretty
of lumber
close.
keeps going up.
yeah, price of lumber keeps going up, and we get eight toothpicks out of this.
Might have cut some pine trees up back, had the Amish saw them out.
That's right.
I'm sure some of a bunch of pine out.
They are.
But
Yeah.
making 2x10s and 2x4s and everything.
And we did, bid out to a number of different, vendors between Menards and Newsom's out of Hillsborough at the Amish, and the Amish just on their trusses and posts were much more competitive, and ended up ordering it from the Amish. We were originally thinking we'd try to divide the order out, see if we could give some of the business, and break it out, but it just didn't work out that way, and Ken placed the order for the steel, no colors on the steel, he didn't have to do that, but for the needed components with the Amish.
All right, do we have a motion to approve these donations?
Make a motion to approve the donations with our thanks. Valley Methodist Church and to Nancy Downstead.
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Earl and seconded by Tricia to approve the donations to the track project with our thanks. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right, now we got to the Baird model.
Yes, in the past, Kent has been the one that kind of lives and breathes in the spreadsheet world and worked with Pete. Pete is now leaving PMA and Forecast 5, and he is going to be the business manager for Verona School District and Pete Grender. So as he leaves there, he's been our point person with Forecast 5. As he leaves their employment and Kent kind of is spending a lot less time in the business office, we'll be back in the classroom. We just thought it was the opportune time to make the change. And Sandy's very comfortable with the Baird model. So.
Did we not use the Baird model
Yes,
before?
we did before. Yes.
And we've only been with Forecast 5 for 3 years or
About
so?
3.
Yeah, I think maybe 3 years.
I didn't realize the price difference was that much. I knew they seemed expensive when we went there.
Baird has another program on top of it that's called their analytics program, and we didn't have that.
If we needed that, we'd probably maybe.
It would be
ballpark, huh?
closer. Yeah. I don't know that it would be, it just, I know there's
If
an
this can do
additional
what
charge.
we want, then
It
we'll
would,
do it. If it doesn't, we can worry about adding something more.
yes.
Questions on the Baird model? Members, if you don't know exactly what this does or something, you'll probably be seeing it over the coming months and things, so. They're the ones we use for forecasting out year by year by year. When will.
Trying anyway.
Try, well, you've done pretty good. I should say you and Sandy have done pretty good with it.
Trying.
Trying to forecast out when we might need a referendum, how we're setting and stuff. It's a lot of guesswork, but we now have it kind of down to, at least partly down to a science. Anyway, Scott, were you making a motion?
To have their do forecasting model approved for 21-22 year.
I'll second that.
Motion by Earl and second by Tricia to approve the Baird forecasting model for 2021-22. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item M, Brian has an attachment here, the FFA convention that's coming up this summer.
Yeah, just in keeping with, these are all things we've done in the past, they're just not things we've done in the past year. Just trying to be above board and explain, because Madison has lifted their restrictions, they're the hosting city, FFA is going to do this, Brian wanted to make sure that it got in front of the board to at least look at it and see, as he indicated in his write-up that he did, they're typically not things that he brings to the board annually, it's something that the FFA does. And the FFA pays for the hotel rooms through their account, that sort of thing is part of this. So, but he just wanted to make sure that, we're trying to be as transparent as possible.
Sounds like everybody going's been vaccinated. Is there even a reason to take 2 vans?
It might just be the number of kids, I don't know how
Well,
many.
you said they could all fit in 1 van, but
Oh,
they'll be taking 2. I assume because of COVID concerns, but if they're all
Yeah.
vaccinated, there's.
and they're not gonna wear masks anyway, he says, so I would like to not have to wear masks, so I guess he's not saying that. But since we approved that for the other group, it only makes sense. I think you got a good point there, unless for any particular reason he wants to take 2, but.
Give them the option, I mean.
Yeah, I will talk to him about it. But with Sam also wanting to go as a chaperone, that might put them over. 7 adults in a Traverse is not like a,
Oh, it's a Traverse.
yeah, it gets you pretty tight.
Believe me, I sympathize.
Yeah. If you're not driving, your legs are long. It's tight.
All right, well, since it's the action agenda, anybody have any other questions on anything Brian had detailed it out very well, so. Aren't any questions, since it's an action item, why don't we have a motion to approve the trip, the way he's described it there?
I'll make that motion. I'll second.
Okay, so motion was by Tricia and seconded by Teresa to approve the trip to the state FFA convention. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Last action item, the 21-22 WIAA membership.
Yeah, so, again, it's just, we're just approving our belonging to the WIAA. The fees are still suspended. They're hopeful that, with the gradual return to, the buzzword normalcy, I guess, they're hopeful that, their finances take a turn for the better and, they can continue to not have to charge schools membership dues or fees. And, so for the time being, we're just, signing up again to be, part of the WIA.
There's no alternative organization.
There's none, no.
We want to continue to have activity.
And they do function a bit as a monopoly.
And the only thing I will point out is this is just senior high. We have not had
Correct.
junior high or middle school, as we would call it, WA for a long time. Other questions at all? A motion to approve membership in the WIAA.
Can make that motion.
I'll second that.
So that motion was by Rich and seconded by Tricia to approve our WIAA membership for the coming year. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion also passes. Okay. We'll move to informational agenda with some discussion items. First one we have listed is COVID protocol.
So, you've probably been paying attention to the number of schools that are moving to a optional masking policy for their summer school. Some did for the end of the school year, with, in some cases, a week or 2 left in the school year. As you get the WASDA news, if you read any of those individual articles, you'll see a number of schools that have moved in that direction. I just wanted to kind of outline for you guys the steps that Kim and Aaron and I have reviewed our plan from last year and made some recommendations on how we could adjust that plan. Some of the difficulty we're going to run into, right now, COVID case counts are very low in our combined county area in our state. And I think that's what's giving people the feeling that, the optional masking is the direction that they want to go. We have no real guidance from the CDC on the fall. They said it'll be forthcoming in the next month or so. And one of the things that we've discussed internally as administration is that obviously reading all the articles, talking to my superintendent friends in different parts of the state, some districts have had very boisterous groups show up at their board meetings and demand immediate removal of masking requirements at that board meeting. And we have had, I think, a very respectful community. I've received a few emails, I've had some phone conversations, but we haven't had people yelling and screaming at board meetings. And so I think that that's healthy. One of the things that we could do in an environment that is as contentious is perhaps look at, once the vaccine is released for elementary students during those age groups, 5 through 12, I think is what they have identified. In the fall, after a certain period of time, we can move to optional masking building wide. We can move to optional masking on a sliding scale, much like we did with our learning model, and say that when community spread starts to ratchet up to a certain level, we're going to institute masking as a protective factor because we know it works. But until it hits that level, we're comfortable with optional masking because many people have been vaccinated. It gives you, I think, opportunities to look at those things. I have no idea where our health departments are going to come down. I think there's some very stubborn ideas at health departments regarding 14-day quarantine periods. After looking at a year's worth of data and looking at the volume of children that have been quarantined, and we have one suspected case of transfer out of that entire group, and I have an actual Google sheet that's created the total number of days that the total number of quarantines, how many children, how many staff it involved. I'll bring it to you. It seems like we could probably do the 7-day with a negative test within 48 hours prior, is the CDC's protocol. And we're working on trying to get a regional partner so all testing for students is free, as well as staff, instead of having to have a separate arrangement with Mayo. Obviously, we have a very high percentage of our staff vaccinated. And for those parents who just don't believe it's right for their kids, then there would be another option if their kid was quarantined that would get them back sooner and still involve, no symptoms and a negative test on within 48 hours of day 7. And so we're working, trying to develop some regional partnerships. Jamie and I at CISA are working with Governmental Clinic and trying to connect their Boscoville clinic as well as the Hillsborough clinic to see if they would work with the DPI and be a regional testing site. So at least people have options. But obviously the guidance for people who are vaccinated is that if they've been exposed, they don't need to quarantine. So that has implications for sporting events, WIA purposes, et cetera. And trying to align what, that was kind of the thing we fell into before, trying to align our protocol for non-vaccinated people for quarantines with what the WIA is going to recommend makes it a lot easier to track. Because if you've got one thing and WIA has another, then you're always kind of caught in the crossfire. So I don't, to be honest with you, I don't envision either of our county health departments embracing anything but a 14-day, but they haven't been willing to require anything of any of the school districts, so we can set our own guidelines as we move forward. But I do think we have to, kind of take a look at the different things that we set up. Obviously, from the time that we picked kids up, we limited the number of kids that were on a bus. Are we going to require face coverings on transportation, to the way that we serve lunch, to the way that we did a lot of things? We have to take a look at all of those. if we look at it at our June 30th meeting and talk about, the issue involving masking, it would allow us to make a decision for summer school in July, the second 2 week. So, I hate to, stack yet another thing on there, but we are talking about ESSER funding and they're related.
No, I think that
So
would
they're,
be good.
things that we probably should discuss.
Then you've got 2 weeks of summer school if any part of that protocol seems to be out of whack or something, you can still adjust it on this.
Well, we can certainly be responsive. One of the things that's gone through my mind is that, the 2 or more symptoms is what we ask people to keep their kids home. But we had a lot of kids with 1 symptom that would come in, but, because they might have bad allergies or they might just have a cold and they're coughing. People can wear a face covering while they have their cold. There's nothing wrong with that idea. Instead of coughing all over your computer and all over your neighbor, that's something we can probably.
Maybe that should be part of the protocol.
I've had it as an
especially in the-
option.
Yeah, I think that if a staff member requests you to wear a mask, you're gonna need to do it or leave that classroom if you're.
And it just seems to make sense that some of these things are very, the common cold may be a 4 or 5 day thing, but you're not required to go home and learn from home. You're just required to, wear the face covering. But again, the 2 or more symptoms, we're probably going to be stuck there. Taking our United States view and our Wisconsin view and yet our rural Wisconsin view, they're all different windows to this pandemic, but the world view can be still a little eye-opening for those countries that don't have access to the vaccine and the levels we have and the variants that are going around. There's still some bad things going on in the world around us. So I want to be cognizant of that, but also, cognizant of what's happening in our communities too. Which is why we set the parameters we did last time, was to look at what was happening in our bi-county area.
So for now, when kids are outside playing, do they have to have a mask on?
No. For the summer school we were going to run in June, our thought was that we would do face coverings inside, not outside. Have the kids eat in the cafeteria, kind of like we did upstairs, every other seat, and kind of ease our way back towards normalcy. And again, most of the kids who are coming in are elementary kids, and they're not able to. Parents aren't able to make that choice, yes or no.
And then it'll be summer basketball and summer volleyball leagues we'll have to discuss. Softball and baseball and outside stuff, that's pretty simple.
Oh, but the indoor,
The indoor, yeah, it's,
I forgot we got that email. Thank you for reminding me.
are those ages of kids that
that can
would be
vaccinated.
able to be vaccinated?
Yep, absolutely.
Do we know when the 5 to 12-year-olds are gonna be eligible?
Yeah, so the whisper is September, but we don't have a definitive date yet, Scott.
As of last week on NPR, Fauci was saying more realistically, he thought later in the fall, October, November.
I know they never want to give people false hope, because if they say early and then it doesn't happen, everybody's angry. But if it happens early and you say later, then everybody's happy. Yeah.
So it might be.
And I think that end date, or the ready date for that, it changes. The last I had heard was potential for September. So if he's recently said October, that's maybe more accurate.
Toward the end of last week.
So are we able to kind of defer, because I know we can't make a motion because it's not an action item, but are we able to defer to the administration to say, follow CDC requirements with some of this stuff? Like, it seems silly that we're gonna go and have high school kids playing basketball when every single one of them have the option to be vaccinated. Or to go and play volleyball when every single one of them have the
They have
option.
the option. We don't have any.
And if they choose not to, they're
So
putting
you-
themselves at risk.
That's their own personal and parent decision was not to.
Yeah, but they're
Why are you
putting
punishing?
other people at risk.
But you're saying you're not, they're saying the risk of transmission if you're vaccinated, that's why if I get exposed, I can still go to work.
Well, yeah, you could still carry it, but
I can
you
still
don't get
carry it.
symptoms, but you can come up with a positive test. But you started that with defer to the administration to follow CDC guidelines,
Yes.
which would be what right now?
I think if you're fully vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask.
And we don't get to verify that in any way, shape, or form, so. Because what is Wisconsin, 30-some% fully vaccinated? I heard one thing was higher. But yet, how many places do you go
But
to
we
see
also have-
two-thirds of the people wearing masks?
Right, people are going out and they're living their lives, and we gotta take that into part too. We can't control what's happening everywhere else, so why are we gonna do so much restriction within this building?
I'm not saying we are, but
Yeah,
I'm just saying
that's
I
my thing,
don't
you
want
get
to totally
vaccinated,
ignore
you
the
did your.
people that follow the rules and to the benefit of those who don't get vaccinated.
I think,
It's
We all
touchy,
know
but I
that
don't
it's
really have a
one way or
problem with what you said.
but I think one of the things we're gonna run into athletically is that if you play a summer sport in somebody else's gym, you're gonna follow their rules.
Yeah.
So if our kids play summer
Right.
volleyball at Westby, it doesn't matter what we say. If Westby says, if you're playing here, this is our rules. If you wanna play, you're gonna do what they
And
say.
is this really our, well, I guess, when we set rules last year, there was no competition, so that part, was out the window. But we had some very stringent rules for here. So we didn't have to deal with the other,
Mhm.
And when we started doing that, it was like your
Right.
league doing it, so. I agree when they go to those places, but when they go to those things, is that actually a school activity? I don't know that that's anything. Do they play
Technically,
those things
yeah.
here now? Because
Technically, according to the WIAA, only the days that our coaches are considering a contact day would be a school-related activity. They can coach more than that, but if they're using a contact day, then that's a school activity. But, so yeah, I mean, at Westby, if.
But our students are going there, do we really have, I'm getting down to, do we have the right to tell them what?
Right,
this-
yeah,
this is-
I don't think we
This
do
isn't
it
like
that
they're going out for a basketball team
Correct.
and
We have-
they're the Kickapoo Panthers.
Right,
They're-
but we will have open basketball here. We will
Yeah.
have open
open gyms,
volleyball.
and we'll
Yep.
host a couple of times,
So those are things we will have to address too.
So like when we go to, I think the Westby League, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think they say you have to wear masks.
Do they?
I think,
I have not had that discussion with Amy yet.
yeah, there was a sheet that came home.
Okay.
Well, maybe we just need to hold out till when do they start doing these stuff?
Well, there was an open gym tonight.
Yeah, and Amy asked, and I just told her, you need to, if we're inside, we're wearing masks until you hear different.
Well, and last year we made a big deal about open gym was for particular, like our students or something. It was like even people that had graduated the year before.
Yeah.
And I know that caused a little bit of an issue a couple of times, but so are we going back to some of that? Is it still for our students or is it open? Or is that just, that we've also got to decide?
I think you gotta
Yes.
remember too, we're in a completely different boat right now than we were last summer too, or last
Well,
fall
at
and
least
last
now we are,
winter. I mean, it's.
Yeah, I don't really have much of a problem with anything you're saying here. It's just somehow I want the assurance that somebody is actually looking at it and thought about it.
Well, I just, where I fall on the 7 through 12 perspective, just my own opinion, is people have an opportunity to vaccinate their kids. There's plentiful vaccine. If they choose not to, nothing we say is going to change their mind. And if they choose to, I feel like that we should be at a place now with community transmission where we're talking about optional. Where we run into a problem when we run school, and I haven't figured out anything on this yet, I'm still thinking about it, is the sixth graders don't fall in that range where they can be vaccinated, but everybody else in the upstairs does. So if you were gonna run the two buildings differently based on the availability, you have one grade that doesn't fit. I haven't solved that yet. I'm not sure I'm going to by the time, but it's something to think in the back of your mind that, that could be the way the school year starts too, until you get the opportunity for people to be vaccinated, is that if it was mask optional or face covering optional upstairs and not downstairs, until such time as the vaccine was approved, I mean, that might be a way that could be thought of, but we have that one grade level up here that doesn't fit. I don't know the answer to that. Trying to find a compromise through this, and I don't know that it's going to be exactly possible.
Yeah, in my view, for the summertime stuff is similar. I just didn't want to, without having at least a discussion about it tonight. For the high school sports in the summertime, like Doug said, everybody's had the option to be vaccinated, and the sport itself in the summertime is completely optional. So if you're not comfortable with it, you certainly don't have to participate. You're not going to be penalized. It's just an activity that's available for you to participate in. And so that's where I lean toward, not trying to police it in the summertime and just saying, and then come the fall, the WI might say, hey, you got to have masks on again. And then at that point, I guess we got to have masks on again. So, but for now, I think that, where we're at, especially given the transmission levels around, I think that we're pretty safe in our area. I would be comfortable with not requiring masks.
Between what you said, follow CDC guidance and
Yeah.
up to administration, and what you're saying is, I'm comfortable. Foresee anything.
Yeah, and again, like Doug said, obviously we're not an action item, but we're gonna have many more conversations. So.
And, these sort of things in the beginning were obviously very, very high stakes decisions as COVID began to climb. And COVID's really low, and people have opportunities to make their own decisions right now. And in the populations we're talking about for open gyms and stuff, we can certainly come up with an administrative guideline until we meet on June 30th that states consistent with CDC guidelines. Here's what we're doing.
Okay. Anybody have any? We'll be back in a couple of weeks. So. All right, can we move on to the new English class then? Essential English.
Yeah, so as we got to the end of the year and we started to look at some students and what's best for them, we realized that we don't really have a alternate option, so to speak, for English. If you look at English 9, 10, English 11, 12, and then we have some upper levels, we really don't have one that kind of fits and gives kids a year of not specific novels, you know what I mean, and is more geared to really your basic skills. And, we have a lot of kids that may not go on to a college level, and, just trying to get them to make sure they're functional with English, basic English skills, and working, in the community and things they may do is pretty critical. And so with that, we looked and thought it would certainly be a good option. We have a number of kids right now that would fit into that boat for sure, to provide them with another option to have essentially what we call an essential English class, which would basically give them, they'd still have to follow the mainstream for 3 other years, but they'd have 1 year of, and if you look at some of other, we have applied math, we have a science class that is, more geared for this same exact specific type scenario where we usually, end up with some kids and, we've functioned and not had to do it. But, as with every year goes, you get a different group in the high school and you have different groups of kids and you take in everything that's happened in the last year and the mix with the pandemic and where things are at. And we certainly do have a lot of kids, I don't want to say a lot, but a number of kids right now that would certainly fit into that category of a class like this as an option.
So the way you said that, it says grades 9 to 12?
Yes,
But
yeah.
are you looking at, so could they do it more than once?
No, they could only do it one time. But basically it would be open to, those kids in those grades. And again, sometimes we get, specific scenarios with, individual kids, and it just gives us a little more flexibility, I think, to try to meet the needs of all the kids that we have.
With applied math, it typically runs on a rotation. It doesn't run every year. So that
Oh,
you can,
okay.
it wouldn't be something you commit to every year. You ran it once, next year you wouldn't have to. Then you pick up another group of students who are coming through, you run it again.
In this, I would envision probably much of the same way. We may not have to have it, every year.
But at least we'd have
an option, if we needed and as we looked at it and said, hey, we have a group of kids that really need a better option. So. Any questions from anybody on it or anything? Again, it's just informational right now. And we can, certainly bring it back.
Looks good. Something we probably need. Thanks, Aaron. Other
All right.
questions for Aaron at all? All right, number 3, baseball co-op with large.
So if you read the back article in the packet, you can see that the Lafarge School Board denied our request to co-op for baseball for next year and the year after for the 2 years as required by the WIA. Their athletic director came down the next day to explain to us what happened. Reason was given to us, or most of the reasoning was that they felt like they were able to have a team and we were able to have a team, whether it be with just the 9 or 10 guys. And so they didn't feel like they were leaving anybody out to dry. So it was just kind of they thought they wanted to keep their identity with baseball. So they decided that they didn't want to move forward with the baseball co-op.
So I'm very disappointed. I feel that they benefit greatly from our co-ops in the respect of the number of kids they provide versus what we provide. We can still have a cross-country team. We can still have a track team. You'd have to correct me on this one. I think for most years we could still have a football team, especially with 8-man. I think one of the things with 8-man is we can't do playoffs when we're co-oped because we're too large, but we've continued to do it because it's been a benefit to them too. And I'm just really disappointed that there isn't a reciprocal respect back to us when we're needing them and we're saying we could benefit from you co-oping with us. I'm not happy.
I would agree with everything Trish said. There's really nothing we can do, though.
So if they come short of another year, I guess.
Yeah, I guess
I guess.
Then we have to decide it.
Yeah, we have to decide. They kind of made a decision that they didn't want to do it, so. I mean, they say they'll have 11. Well, what happens if a couple of them can't?
Or some.
But then it's too late.
Well, that's.
Or if
that's
our
what-
9 or 10,
Yeah,
then it's
that's
too
what's
late
gonna
for
happen,
us.
but I guess, they kind of made a decision, they want to go that route, so.
I think that the difficult part is the timing.
Yeah, that's.
They made their
when does
decision,
this
our board meeting happened, it had to be sent to the WIA by June 1st. So they had their board meeting, they said no, and we didn't have the opportunity to potentially seek out somebody else to try to run a co-op with. I don't know if they would exist, but it would have at least given us options.
Is there I don't know that there is any that would exist. If there was, is there an appeal to WA to, emergency thing for a co-op because we were basically had the rug pulled out from under us with that decision?
We could definitely check. I'm not sure. I don't have the answer on that.
So that would be the only other possibility that I can think of. And I also,
I don't know if
I
anything
don't know
else.
what's out there and what the only other school that would be the closest would be North Crawford, and I have no idea what their numbers look like.
For the sports that Lafarge does not co-op with us, they co-op with Youth Initiative.
And I had forgotten that they did that.
And I think during COVID, I'm not sure that they had many students participating from Youth Initiative, but that may change. I think they typically got a few anyway for their baseball and basketball teams, but that's just conversation. I don't know if it's how many exactly.
It's always 1 or 2, I think.
How many kids is Eric expecting out?
He's hoping for 9 or 10. I think he feels 10 would be excellent.
So when do kind of the current co-ops that we have, when do they come due?
Cross country wrestling and track all expire after 21-22. So after this next school year. We'll need to renew those, we'll need to renew, cross-country by February, track or wrestling by April, and track by June of next year. And then football, because of the realignments with the conferences and that, we actually had to sign on for a co-op or to be 8-man until 2023. So 2021, which is this fall, 2022, and 2023. We just renewed that. So that one goes through 2023, and we'll have to renew that one by December 1st of 2022.
I wouldn't be in favor of right at this moment. I don't know where everybody else stands, but I think Lafarge needs to understand that this was upsetting. I don't feel it was I feel like the co-ops have worked well. And so that's almost even more difficult that there comes a time now that we're saying we could use your help here. And it doesn't sound like they're providing, like we'll still have a solid cross-country team. We'll still have a solid number for track. I don't know where our football numbers are. But that's 3 years out now, but.
And wrestling, even with the
Wrestling,
co-op,
they didn't
we
even
have
give us
such
any
small
last year.
amount that, yeah.
So I guess
But there'd
that's
be no
where
need.
I stand at this point in time.
I'm feeling the same exact way, where it's like we've been more than willing to say, yeah, let's co-op, bring your students, we'll let them play, we'll let them run track, and then now it's like,
They're track.
I don't think so.
But I think it actually, from my perspective, being a kind of a large town high school person, it's interesting to me that co-ops were formed and a neutral nickname was chosen. Because in a lot of schools, if you have the number of students that Kickapoo has in the sport, and another school wants to send 3 for the opportunity to participate, there's no neutral color, neutral nickname. It is, you can send your kids, we'd love to have them, but
This is the first time I've got to say this at a board meeting, so I'm gonna say it. That neutral nickname was never approved by the school. That was done by coaches and administration, none of whom are sitting here now.
So are we allowed to back out on that piece of it? Like,
yeah, that's in our agreement with them,
and
which
do
is
we have one?
modifiable.
Okay. I
We're
mean,
allowed to do anything we want when these renew. Every time they renew, we can, I mean, we can just
But they
say,
have
you
to
know,
We
agree
have
to
one
the
with,
renewal.
right, yeah, but we have one with the WIA and we have one with Lafarge about how we're gonna do costs. Those are
Yes,
2
yep.
separate things.
yeah.
And the nicknames, and then the other thing that comes to me is the significant investment that we, from a capital perspective, that we put into the track is an asset to this school district. And, you know, if we're gonna start talking about, you know, competition and charter schools, and we're gonna try to draw kids, and what do we have, so it's our people and it's our facility are some of the assets we have.
Mhm.
And we have a lot of staff members that coach that you just don't really see in a lot of other school districts. They build relationships with kids. We have a newly completed track that costs the school district, you know, $750,000 when it's all done and set for. And Lafarge didn't pay a penny for it, but their athletes get to come down here and utilize it. Well, that could also change. There could be an agreement that if we
They're gonna
continue
pay.
our co-op, they're gonna pay X
Upkeep.
amount a year that goes into a sinking fund so that when we need to resurface the track, they have to pay something for it. We have a lot of tools at our disposal other than necessarily walking away from the co-op. So I'll throw all that out there to you because I think the co-ops have been good for kids. And in some cases, we may say this is still good for us. And in other cases, we may say this isn't really beneficial for us. But that's, you know, that it's gonna come down to how the board looks at each one of those co-ops and their participation levels and all those kinds of things when they come due for renewal.
And I think bottom line, the decisions we have made have, on co-ops, as far as I recall, have always pretty much been what's good for the kids. I mean, sometimes it was so that we could have a team, but many times it was just, this is better for the kids. We could have had a football team longer than we did before we started co-oping, but the good for the kids part was, do you want your freshman playing on the line against a senior? No, he's more likely to get hurt, more likely to not come out another year. So what's best for the kids? And I'm glad we based it on that. I share the frustration. I did read the article, and I do, if it's representative of their feelings and their discussion, I do kind of get their feeling that an identity that they want to hang on to. That's the feeling I got from the article, and I get that. But I think it's unfortunate, you know, in this case, with the numbers being so marginal in both cases and put together, could have been a team for sure, and some JV games, et cetera. And now it's, you know, to me, with the numbers that were in the article, it's questionable whether either school separately will have. So, but.
Or kids will be forced to try to do two things.
Yeah.
You know, I can do track 2 days a week and I can play baseball 2 days a week in order to make sure you have an extra person, but I really like track, but I'm willing to help.
Right.
And we've seen that in the past where kids have tried to do both.
How many years has it been since we've had somebody did both?
I think we always have like one or two that.
This year,
I
not.
don't think they had any.
So we've had a couple of really good athletes that have tried to help out both. They might just do, like, I remember one in particular that did shot and discus and play baseball. So they're just trying to get practice in shot and discus after baseball was over, or in the morning. That student used to run the school too. So just, you know, the kind of stuff that it's not always, but once in a while, usually it's a male that wants to play baseball and run track. So.
Used to have someone did football and cross country too, didn't we, back in the day?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a few, but without those kids or the flexibility afforded to those kids, you know, that might be the key to fielding a baseball team. Because track numbers are pretty strong.
Yeah. Any other comments before we move off of that discussion item?
So will our kind of agreement with Lafarge?
Doesn't exist. The baseball one?
No, not the
Oh,
baseball
I'm
one,
sorry.
yeah, no, just in general. So you said like you do this contract every year or whatever, is it renewed every year?
Agreement of how we
It's
run our
when we
co-ops.
renew though, right, Kent? That doesn't
usually.
get separated.
Yeah,
And it's on the thing we signed. We used to get those once in a while to look at, because there's what, about 10 points or so of those?
Yeah, and that document just stays in place until we want to change it, but we only ever change it if we change it during a renewal.
Right.
Yeah.
We haven't changed much. I do remember, the last thing I remember changing was, in addition to it being a per student sharing of cost, there was a minimum cost.
Correct. Yep. There was a minimum of 30%.
So they were gonna,
Because of the cost of reconditioning helmets and
Yeah.
equipment costs.
there's just things that are ongoing every
Correct.
year, so you should pay something to kind of hold on to things.
Yep. So I can include those
So next time we get
when
one,
we
maybe
get ready to renew for this time around.
I think what Trish is saying is she might like to review them before the season starts.
Well, that's what I'm
Sure.
wondering, is it something that can be?
Well, that's our agreement with them. I think it is reviewed.
Oh, okay, I thought it was part of the thing we sent to WIA that at the bottom of that thing, or that, maybe that was years ago when I remember.
No, the renewal with the WIA is every time, there's an application and there's a renewal. The renewal for the WIA just says you're gonna continue to do what you have been doing. And so when we've applied, we've always had to include that document at the beginning. So when we applied, we said, this is what we're gonna be doing, and then when we renew, we say, we're just gonna keep doing that, unless we change it. Then we say, we're gonna change this, and then we tell WIA we're changing it this
But
way.
we can't change.
But we can
something now.
we need to
middle of
change
a
it when the
2-year.
renewals come up.
Okay, that's what I was trying to.
But some of those things about cost structure, et cetera, I find, we're gonna have to look into that. I find that hard to believe that we can't change how we're gonna operate that only on a renewal, because that's an agreement between us and the other district about how we're gonna share costs on a sport. That doesn't have anything to do with WIA.
But we have to provide them that information when we apply.
Right, but I think if we change it, we just provide them with a new copy. And I'm not saying Lafarge would be.
Maybe that would be worth checking.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, we gotta
WIA.
check.
I can check it.
With that, along with is there an emergency out to looking for another
Basically.
co-op opportunity, since the timing was so bad on the other one, and I thought, had reasonable assurance that was going to happen. So, obviously,
I would agree.
assurance doesn't mean the the commitment, but I understand that.
I'm just struggling with one thing you said, Janet, where, Lafarge talked about the pride piece of it and having a husband who went to school here, the Kickapoo Panthers football, had a lot of pride. And it was very difficult and continues to be very difficult. And I'm looking at Teresa because I think her husband's in the same boat.
Predators?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it might have been before your time on the board too, Earl, I don't remember, but that never came.
Well, it never came to us,
That
no, it's
never
after it was
came.
on the board, but the thing of it is, I think the wrestling, are now called Predators. It's when they first met, it was called Paws and Claws, the Wildcats and the Panthers, so that's what the name was, and then I think a couple years after that, somebody, okay, we got the Predators, just take the rest and make it the Predators.
And I doubt if that name is on the WA thing, so that's something,
And I just think there was a lot of pride. I think there's hurt feelings still to this day of the name change, of how it was, especially with the imbalance of, how much they provide versus how many our school provides. But because it was good for the kids,
Right.
these things were done. And I don't.
Well, and part of that on the name was the trying to compromise on uniforms. Because it wasn't just your name, it was,
Colors.
I heard as much about that the first couple of years as I did about the name. What are they out there in these purple and whatever uniforms for them? That's, they want to see their red and black and white. I mean, that would be.
And I think that conversation, as you were indicating, was different when we first started the co-op. If my memory is correct, we had 60% of the athletes, they had 40.
Yes.
There was a much greater participation rate from Lafarge.
It's fairly.
It wasn't, 20 kids on football and 4 come from Lafarge and 16 are here.
And then let's not forget that things do swing both ways. There was a
They do.
time years ago when we had, one cross-country runner? Or some very small, this is pre the current coach, but, and Lafarge had a few. So,
They created
I agree
Create a
that
team
90% of the
cross-country
time,
before.
it's what you're saying, but it does swing both ways, so.
But it's not in this instance.
Right,
No.
that's, I think the
That's
problem
my-
is
my-
we've,
Upsetting me.
and then you kind of get the rug pulled out from under you going, oh, wow.
Well, I think other than having Kent get some information from WA, I'm not sure there's anything further that we can actually do.
Information anyway, yep.
We want to contact North Crawford and explore.
I think once he finds, and I don't.
I can double check on that. The difficulty that I have with it, and this goes back to what you said at the beginning, we've always done what's best for the kids. And I feel like in all of these discussions that we've been having about the colors and the names and the this and the that and where the games are played, I think that, these are extracurricular activities that the kids need to enjoy. And, we approved a fishing club because there's some kids that are interested in fishing. So the part where that I struggle with is that, as adults in these communities, we think about the history and we think about, and that's all very important, but we still have to continue to come back to what do the kids want? And that's with this co-op, with the baseball co-op in particular, because we could talk about the other ones until we blew in the face. With the baseball co-op in particular, I feel like the kids enjoyed it. And that's the most disheartening part, in my opinion. And I do feel like the kids enjoy the other co-ops as well. And so that's where I struggle with just saying, hey, thanks, but no thanks. And so while I share all the same frustrations, for sure, and it does wear off a little, but definitely, I feel like the kids enjoyed this, and so that's the part that I struggle. But maybe they didn't. Maybe they went home and they said, no, we don't want to do this. But I didn't hear that from our kids. So.
Well, with that, I think we'll move on. Sub-teacher pay.
Yep, just bringing it to your attention, during this informational, we're at 105 for our full day sub pay, and most of our surrounding school districts are at 120 a day. So before the school year starts, we may need to look at that to remain competitive with our subs because it's a tight market out there for subs.
Do we still, or do we plan to still do the, I call it dedicated subs?
Yes. Yes, we still continue to do that. That helps us a lot. I think it frustrates maybe some of the other districts that aren't doing it, but I think it helps Aaron and Kim when they need somebody, so. And those dedicated subs are pretty committed to Kickapoo and to being here, so it's worked out beneficially both ways.
Okay, are we ready for Kim to talk about the AGR report?
Okay, we had visited this after the fall semester, so we've already kind of reviewed where we were, so we're going to be looking at that second to the last column, the spring semester progress, and where our kids ended up at the end of the year. So, in kindergarten, reading, we had 18% of those students who are in the high-risk category. Our goal was less than 10%, but we still did reach some of those kids and bring them up. So I was pleasantly surprised with that data. Also, 36% scored in the low risk, doing very well. So we have a lot of kids kind of right there in the middle. Kindergarten math, real close to our goal. We are at 14% of our students in the high risk benchmark, and we did achieve 82% of our students scored in the low risk, doing very well with that math curriculum.
So if I can interrupt before you turn the page.
Yep.
This is the perfect example of how it should be, right? The high risk has decreased all the way through on both spots, and the low risk has
Increased, yep.
And that's what we want. I know, I always seem to
Yep,
go
that's
backwards
what
to
we
me.
want.
But high risk, we want to, so this is the perfect case.
This is, yeah,
Switch.
kindergarten did great, and reaching those students in spite of, the
The year
pandemic
was.
year that they had. But yeah, so we're bringing those kids who struggle up, and we're elevating those kids who are kind of in the middle to be high achievers. So that's kindergarten. First grade, we struggled. We remain with 48% of our students in the high risk. So 48% of our first graders in reading are struggling, and 10% scored in the low risk. The CBM, which is kind of our fluency, which is indicative of how the number of words per minute that they're reading. So 45% of those first graders are in the high risk, they struggle, and 10% are doing very well and they scored in the low risk. Math for our first graders, also 17% scored in the high risk, and almost 60% scored in the low risk. Reading for second graders, we have 30% of that student body scoring in the high risk. 30% of our second graders are struggling in reading, and 36% are low risk. The fluency, the CBM there, 48% scored in the high risk category, meaning they're not meeting those words per minute benchmarks that we set. They're reading slower, and 30% of those students have met those benchmarks and are reading fluently. Second grade math, 23% then are in their high risk, are strugglers. 37% are in the low risk, which was an increase, which looks good. Third graders, we have 21% in our high risk, and 58% in our low risk. Our CBM English, which is that fluency rate, 13% are high risk and 47% are in low risk. And our third grade math students, 13% are high risk students and 62% are in the low risk. And the AGR report is only a K through 3 report. Obviously, I feel very strongly moving forward with with the supports that we have in place to reach our struggling students, specifically with our interventions and the tiered supports that we can provide in not only the academics, but the social emotional too, like Erica was talking about, the kids coming in with the stressors and helping them regulate in order to learn. So providing those systems of support, I feel confident in the system that we can implement next year. Additionally, a lot of these students who were in the high risk categories are coming into summer school, which is great. We'll have them 2 weeks in June and 2 weeks in July. And specific to those first and second graders, they are in Mrs. Silverson and Mrs. Kaufman classes, which is that intensive, explicit intervention material. I think a lot of our fluency, there is expected growth throughout the year. And if they're moving too slowly, obviously, they're not going to gain that comprehension piece either. And I think there wasn't that consistency probably with the exposure to literacy and reading the 20 minutes. So I will submit this report this week. It is due by the end of June to DPI.
When was the spring test?
The spring test, we took the Fast Bridge in probably the beginning of May.
And the fall?
Or it could have been we were out by May 18th.
Yeah, so it had to
like
be
the
the first
end of
part.
April, beginning of May.
And when did we do the fall one? We looked at that before.
The fall one, yeah, we were virtual, prior to Christmas, and we decided to wait until December. So we've been virtual that, I don't know, when did we go virtual? November. So when we came back in January, we held off and we did not do that assessment until those first couple of weeks we were back in January.
Any other questions? Thanks, Kim. All right, I guess that gets us to schedule of meetings, policy committee, get to meet again.
Christie, which section are we gonna go to the 8s next?
We did the 7th, so the 8th, the 8,000 is next operation.
Well, what does everybody think that's on policy?
So last week we were on that.
What about the week after the 4th of July?
7th?
I was kind of thinking maybe we could, we're gonna have to schedule a personnel meeting. I was hoping to have interviews for paras of that on the 7th.
6th?
So the 6th would work for me, sure.
Yeah, that'd work for me.
Tuesday?
Yeah.
And what time?
We've been going at 4:30.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask, since it's the policy committee is meeting, is there a plan, or does Neola have one? Do we have to have one? How and when do you anticipate, or is this too early to ask this manual being presented to the board? And how? Because I certainly don't want it dropped in one thing.
Oh, come on.
And new
Janet.
policies, which I'm gonna say, I don't wanna treat this like new policies, need 2 readings. Not that they can't overlap, but you know. But, and I don't have to have it now, I'm just,
Yeah, I can
maybe
ask
the
Scott
committee
what's
could
typical.
discuss
Yeah,
that.
and I can ask Scott what's typical.
And maybe and just something maybe to put on the agenda for one of your committee meetings to discuss what that plan is, and if there's any timeline. Not to rush it, whenever it comes.
We'll
You want
ask.
just a weekend to read it
No,
all?
no.
Pass them out at 6 o'clock.
I was too big to download, so you know. Thank you.
Yep.
And then we've also got buildings and grounds.
Yeah, and I don't really, Kevin is gonna come to the June 30th meeting to present to the whole board.
Okay.
So I don't have an immediate need for a building and grounds meeting, but because we are going with the full day 4K, you know, we had to move a para over, so we have a need to hire one. So my thought was if we posted for that position and we had a due date of June 30th, that would give us some time to review those and set up the interviews. I was hoping to maybe do that on July 7th if that worked out with some of the personnel committee members.
Personnel is, I have forgotten. Christine, do you have that? Oh, well, I got it in my email, I can look and see. Scott, Teresa,
Teresa, Scott, and
Earl.
Earl. Yep, Teresa, and Teresa's the chair, yeah. So Teresa, Scott, and Earl.
Yeah, I don't have a
So-
timeline exactly on the 7th, you know, but if we don't know how many applicants we're gonna get, we could probably tighten that up, but if we could that day, if that day works, we could, you know, start at interviews at 3:30 or
Thursday,
it's a Wednesday.
next Wednesday.
That's fine.
Yeah, that works.
Would work for people. All right, I will, as we get closer and lock in, Kim and Katie will be looking at the applicant pool. And then I think we'll probably have Landon be part of the interview group as well. Landon
What
Harder,
position
so-
is it?
Pardon me?
I missed what position.
Paraeducator because we moved one of ours over to 4K, we need another staff member. So. All right. More to come on how those applications come in once we get it out posted here.
So we'll move on to superintendent's report.
A couple updates. The CISA administrator, Jamie Nutter, is working on kind of a region-wide discussion about how schools are going to transition into fall and try to bring some experts in to facilitate that discussion on July 7th. And then Steve at Westby, their superintendent, was hoping to try to put together a medical advisory committee and was wondering if other superintendents wanted to join to discuss with the medical community what they're recommending for the fall. And so I gave them some dates that would potentially work for me. So just to let you know, we're trying to cover all those fronts as we move into the fall and listen to what people have to say about schools and how we should be tackling these issues for the fall. Speaking of tackling, our individual tackling sled has come up missing. It was made of all steel, probably weighed about 300 pounds. My guess is that somebody came and took it and scrapped it, probably would be my guess. I think our football coach and building and grounds people looked everywhere for it. the larger tackling sled is not something that is super mobile in terms of, having somebody do that, but the individual one could. We looked at the cost of replacement and our deductible and filing a claim on it is not super beneficial here for the district. But Dustin did order some what are called tackling wheels for individual tackling drills, and it'll take its place.
So where was that, by a shed or something, or?
I think it was
I think he had it across the road.
Or across the
Because they
road
were
where they
practicing
were
across the road.
Across the road by the
Yeah.
big one,
What's
Yeah,
that?
it used to
by the
was,
big one. Over there by where the big one.
Over by where the big one is, yeah.
It used to be over on the baseball
Yeah.
field when they
Yeah.
practiced there.
But then because spring football, they didn't want to practice on the baseball
Right.
field because we were using that for
Oh,
baseball. So
and
then they went
it was
across the
outside,
road
so-
because they didn't want to ruin their field. So all the stuff was across the road.
Just an update on ESSER 3, at a statewide meeting, the DPI consultant indicated their timeline is to open those grants to school districts sometime in September, October. She indicated that there are a lot of requirements regarding focus groups, staff, students, parents, board members, administration all need to be part of the process as we look at budgeting those funds. There's a bunch of requirements, but that they didn't have the requirements yet to release them, to give us that guidance quite yet. In terms of how you check the boxes that you've met those requirements, they're not ready to release that. But I make you aware of that. There'll be steps that we will have to take for ESSER 3. I've been in contact with a couple local banks requesting differing borrowing amounts as well as different amortization periods. So both Citizens Bank and Royal Bank, I've got Royal's bid, and Citizens should be forthcoming. I've also been consulting with Lisa Boysen from Baird. We should be able to probably review those funding scenarios at our June 30th meeting. And I think we need to make that decision on timeline and amount to borrow on the July 14th meeting. We're in a situation where I don't necessarily believe that inflation's in control. And I think we're going to start to see lending rates increase, not largely, but gradually. And I think it'd be in our best interest to lock those loan rates in and then reinvest that money to make a little interest off of it while we're waiting until we have to draw on it. So, another option would be to wait and use the borrowing when you need it, but you'd be subject to what the interest rates would be next spring, not what they are now. And they're pretty low in this current environment.
So we'll look at that on the 30th.
Yes.
First.
Yeah. And then the only other thing or actually I have two things. The Rogan shoe truck came here today. I authorized for the support staff who spend the majority of their time on the concrete during the day to we piggyback because Go Macro does it once a year, and we had them come here, and I didn't know they were coming to Go Macro today until after our last board meeting. Not the process I usually like to follow, but I just felt it was important, and so those 14 employees were serviced by the shoe truck today to make sure they have supportive non-slip footwear and safety toe footwear where that's required. And then a state budget update. So you probably read the joint finance, approved $0 in state funding for schools, but wanted to segregate $350 million so that they felt they would be in compliance with the federal government, that you can't spend less on education than you did as a percentage of the overall state budget. The next day, the Department of Ed sent a memo to the state saying that's not going to work. That's not consistent with the language. You can't take it, put it in a fund, because in the state of Wisconsin, a current legislature cannot bind a future legislature to use that money as they felt they wanted to use it. You can't park it in a fund and say, this is education funding, because in 2 years, a different duly elected legislature could spend that money on something else. And so the Department of Ed is saying that's not going to work. Since that happened, the Legislative Fiscal Bureau has come out and indicated that their the projections in terms of revenue is about over $4 billion more than what they anticipated. And so a very influential legislator, the Republican aisle, Alberta Darling, came out in favor of funding schools and giving $350 million in special education aid and per pupil categorical aid to school districts. So Kent and I, in the last 2 weeks, have changed the model 3 times to reflect the seesaw of wins here. And it's very difficult to get a handle on. If we had to function, if we were penalized by the federal government, we weren't going to be able to, have access to the ESSER funds, and we weren't going to get state funds. That's political suicide. Nobody's going to do that. But if enough states put pressure on the federal government, I think the thought was they might relax some of their restrictions and acquiesce a little bit. So I don't necessarily see that happening. I think that it's a good sign that the revenues were up, and I think that they look at per pupil categorical aid. If you remember, that's the type of aid that funds every student in the state, regardless of where they live. So if you allow revenue limit growth, some school districts just tax for 100% of that. Per pupil categorical aid is an amount of money that follows every kid, whether they're in a wealthy school district or a poor school district. And so it's equal, and it affects everybody because their taxes don't go up. The revenue limit doesn't go up. So if our revenue limit goes up $200 and we're aided at 65%, then we get 130 of that $200 back. We tax for 70 of it. And other school districts tax for the whole amount. In this scenario, they just give it to you as per pupil categorical aid, and you don't tax for any of it. Special education aid essentially is going to work the same way. It's going to reduce our transfer from 10 to 27 at the end of the year and leave more money in Fund 10 because they're increasing the rate of reimbursement that they're providing for special ed. And I think the joint finance was going to go 28 to 30%. I think Alberta Darling is saying let's create a dollar amount in per pupil categorical aid, and then let's adjust special ed aid up a little farther. Both of those things are very good news for school funding. If you think about the funding cliff that could have happened after the federal money goes away, I think it's good for taxpayers because they won't see a tax increase associated with it. And I think that's kind of what they're hoping for. I know that this gets a little deep in the weeds, but one of the concerns about continuing to put money into per pupil categorical aid versus putting it into the equalization aid formula is that at some point there was a lawsuit many years ago, Vincent versus Voight in the state of Wisconsin, about school financing, and is it doing what it said it was supposed to do, which is to use the equalization aid formula to impact those disadvantaged kids and communities by putting more state aid into those areas. They ruled at that time that it was consistent. And the more money you put into funding all kids in a separate pot of money through per pupil categorical aid, the more you begin to wonder about where's the tipping point where some group of school districts decides to resurrect that suit and say this isn't consistent. Nobody seems to know where that tipping point is. It's a favored way of funding schools because it's equal. So the very wealthy, property wealthy school districts get the money. They don't have to tax for it. The up north school districts that have a lot of their people who don't send their children to school as property owners on the lakes, they don't get state aid either. So they don't get the property increases. So it tends to appeal to a large constituency of legislators. And so I think that's eventually what we're going to see come out of the state budget. So that was a mouthful, but that's kind of where we are today on the state budget. That's all I have.
Principals reports.
But
I don't really have a lot to offer tonight. I did engage. There are some really great things that came out of COVID. And one of them was being able to put out that Google form to get the 4K registration, which gave me immediate access to email. So I created an email group just so I could engage some of those new 4K parents with starting the new childcare and try to be a little more visible and answer some of the questions that they might have. So in doing that, I've gotten a lot of great feedback and they're very appreciative of the childcare. And I've been able to answer a lot of questions to hopefully already start building that relationship. The 4K screener, and they have registered, Sam created a registration online. So they registered, they'll be bringing their 4K students in during summer school so we can give the 4K screener. Sarah and Sam will be working to get the room ready. It's going to be our old computer lab room, which is where we're going to offer our childcare. And DJ has been diligent to make it safety compliant. And I just wanted to mention, I thought the elementary concert that Greg and Catherine did was phenomenal. I was just so proud of the kids. They've done a spectacular job all year, and it was fun to watch them. And putting that together virtually, that was really cool. And one last note, I'm hoping it's okay. I'm moving my office back to my office, right, Doug?
Yes.
So that move will take place and I'll be back by Melissa, which will make it a little bit easier too. I've enjoyed being.
Where were you?
I was down the hall by the recess doors because we had to have my office as the COVID room. So.
I probably.
Yeah. And that's all I have to offer this evening.
Aaron.
All right, with end of the year comes a number of reports and trying to keep track of data in regard to attendance, analyzing test scores, discipline, grades. It was interesting this year, Vernon County does a truancy report, and just to see the number of kids from each school that typically numbers are very low, but with COVID, how many kids, met the actual legal definition of truancy this year. So that was interesting to see. SEL, I've been working with Katie and Angela. We've been exploring there's lots of different companies out there right now with the change in the last year. They have a lot of startup companies in regard to SEL, but ours is the best. So there's lots of different options. So we've been exploring some of those, trying to find out which one will be best for us. There's elements where we can just have a curriculum base. There's also parts where there are some programs that have an actual survey and data that you can utilize, some of them linked to Skyward. So we're trying to find the one that is the most beneficial to the kids, but also working with the staff that fits the best to utilize some of this data as far as curriculum and doing what's best for our kids. With that, we are signed up for the Youth Risk Behavior Survey next year. So there's info that's just come out on that. It somewhat syncs definitely with SEL, just to find out survey of your kids, how it works. It's a survey that goes throughout the state to work with that. ACT scores, with the last year and everything taking so long for the ACT, usually we get the scores back right away, but because so many kids hadn't taken it and whatever, all the scores for the state actually just came out and were recently accessible for us. So I want to bring that to the board in July just to see ACT scores where we, sat with the rest of the schools in the conference and locally. And last thing, we have an opportunity for a grant that we're going to explore here in the next week or so. It's due somewhat soon. It just came out. It could possibly open up some funding for us with the guidance program, but we'll see how it exactly fits. So we're looking at the criteria for that. If it's something that could work, definitely something we'll try to do and explore, but we'll see how that works. So, any questions? All right.
Thanks, Aaron. All right, I guess that gets us to our closed session. So our next item is convene to closed session, Wisconsin State Statute 19.85 1C, which is considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. Purposes tonight are the interventionist position and driver education teacher. We have a motion to go to closed session.
So move.
I'll second that.
The motion was by Earl, seconded by Tricia, and then we have to do a roll call for that.
Tricia Clements.
Yes.
Teresa Gander.
Yes.
Scott Walter.
Yes.
Earl Wallace.
Yes.
Rich James. Janet Mathis.
Yes.
Yeah, but taking 20 minutes to get us back on the right.
We're all set, Janet.
Okay, we're back in open session at this point, and we have some motions to be made following closed session. The interventionist position, we need a motion on that one?
No, I wasn't gonna say anything.
Make a motion to hire Kelsey Danes as our interventionist. Yeah, anyway, that
Second
position
that.
anyway.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Earl and second by Tricia to approve Kelsey Danes for the interventionist position. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. And the other item from closed session was the driver's education teacher.
Make a motion to approve Eric Wiggle to do our driver's education instruction.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a second to approve Eric Weigel for the driver's education position and basically approve the development agreement that was presented
Presented to us.
Okay, so that motion was by Earl, second by Tricia. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion also passes. Audience to visitors and board members. Do we have anything else? We just need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
And I'll second it.
That motion was by Tricia, seconded by Earl to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?